Good evening, Browns fans, and welcome to OBR Weekly. My name's Barry. I'm the web dork of the OBR. And right over there, that's Fred Greetham. That's the legend here to join us again as both Fred and I have been off on our respective vacations and are ready to talk some Browns football. How's it going, Fred?
Oh, we got a little bit of glitches, coming back of vacation, but I'm doing good. 2 weeks
Oh,
from now, West Virginia.
yeah, beautiful West Virginia coming up for you here in a couple of weeks as we get back into football finally. This week, not a lot of news to talk about. I've got a couple things here listed. I have widened the question horizons for people watching the program. Basically, whatever you want to talk about. We prefer Browns. We prefer Browns and NFL content. But if anything's on your mind, feel free to hit us up with any questions that you have. Um, and we'll we'll try to gear the program in that particular direction. So that's what we'll do here. We've already got a couple of questions. Why don't we just jump straight into them, Fred? You game for that?
Yes, sir.
All right, good to hear. First question comes from Fumble 13. He says, obviously the NFL will appeal the verdict in the Sunday ticket case, but if all teams are required to cough up $447 million each, can all survive that hit? That's a very good question, Fumble 13. And my guess is if they were left to their own devices, some would struggle. But I don't believe that they will be left up to it will be left to their own devices, and I don't believe that they will have to pay that amount. Um, what do you think about that, Fred? Are there some teams out there that would struggle copying up $500 million if suddenly asked?
I don't know all the financials of teams, but I mean, off top of the head, you'd think teams like Cincinnati and ones that don't have an outside revenue source, like you don't have the Home Depot behind you like Arthur Blank does with the Falcons, and you go down the list, the ones that have big corporations as opposed to family passed down, Ursay to
Mm-hmm.
Ursay to Brown, where the kids just kind of inherit the team, which is a pretty good thing, but they don't
Yeah,
really do anything else. So I don't know. I'm sure they'll figure it out. The show must go on. They'll do something, with making that work.
yeah. And Fumble points out that Cincy and Green Bay were the top two he was thinking about. I am sure that the NFL can figure out some sort of financial mechanism to keep those teams from going under, given that it's worth billions and billions and hundreds of billions of dollars as a corporate entity. So I'm not overly concerned. One of the things that has been discussed is the NFL increasing its revenues, which it is able to do almost at the drop of a hat. Um, one of the things that it can do is, of course, expand to 18 regular season games, which it sort of wants to do anyway. This might move up the time frame. Another thing that I read about the NFL doing is giving licensing rights to a slot machine video game, which it has done. And so, they are, sort of unfettered at this point when it comes to making money. There isn't anything holding them back at this point when it comes to coming up with new revenue schemes. So,
Yeah, you got the golden goose, so and somewhere, some way, you're gonna have judges or somebody gonna, side with the NFL and kind of gets, my simple interpretation is these things get litigated, they get drawn out, and the only person that makes money are the lawyers. They're in the middle of everything, and whether it's last 10 years or 1 year or whatever, they just keep raking in the money,
yeah,
in the midst of everything else, and You get ordered to pay that amount, different thing getting actually receiving it, in
Yeah.
a quick, timely fashion.
Yeah, exactly. And the NFL undoubtedly parachuting in battalions of lawyers to fight this. You can pay for a lot of lawyers, for $14 billion, and uh, I suspect they've got a pretty good lawyer budget at this point. So, all right, good question to kick us off there, Fumble. Thank you very much. Let's go to a question from Sancho Bermuda on Twitch. And Sancho says, should we kick it off with a trip down memory lane? How was the 0-16 season of 2017? What are your fondest memories of going 0-16, Fred? Was it the tension of the record-setting opportunity? Was it the thrill of going into the record books? How was that 0-16 season from your perspective, sir?
Not much different from 1-15 and,
Mm-hmm.
3-13 or 2-14. You know, there's some infamy to not win a game, not too many teams go that route. You gotta work hard to do that. Seeing Hugh Jackson jumping in the lake, I guess, was, a thrill. Um, but no, they all run together for me, and they're 0-16 or, like I said, 5-11 or whatever they were bad and they weren't in the playoffs. And it got to the point where, usually in those seasons, you just wanted to get them over with, and wait till next year and talk about the draft. And, probably midway or so through that year, everybody's talking about, okay, get the number one pick in the draft. What are you going to do with it? And I think that was Myles Garrett. So if I don't think you won anything, but if you're gonna go winless and take all the beef out with a Hall of Fame player like Myles Garrett, I guess you can't be. At least you got a consolation prize for sure. There's been many times when the number one pick, turns out to be like Tony Mandarich or somebody who was a big bust, and that would
Right,
have made it even worse. So,
right.
I guess that would, to be honest, haven't really thought a lot about it. Looking back, it was some dreadful football, though. Those 2 years, you know, even as a writer, you kind of go in kind of excited to cover a game, on what's going to happen. And with that, there was a little doubt. You knew you were going to get rolled every week. You just had a lousy team, and they've had lousy teams forever. Since the team
Yeah.
returned, just until the last 3 or 4 years, you can start to get a little excited about it. So, yeah, don't really care to go back to those days again. Well, let's put it this way: they go to those days again and are back to starting over. This guy's gonna move on from covering them.
Time to check out. Yeah, I think that might be time for me to ride off into the old sunset as well. But hopefully, not something that we're going to have to worry about here fairly in anytime soon. Eco OBR asks, when will we see Guardian caps being used in regular season NFL games? And that would not be a total shocker to see sooner rather than later, in my opinion, Fred. Anything for safety, right?
Yeah, I mean they're kind of goofy looking. You get used to them in training camp, seeing the linemen, but it looks a little weird to see skills position players and so forth. And part of me thinks they're just kind of, slowly but surely trying to get people used to it.
Mm-hmm.
Just like anything, you can look at some fashion deal that looks really hideous, but after you see it a while, then you just get used to it. So,
Right.
they'll probably try to use them in preseason games at some point and see. I don't know. I mean, it takes away a lot of the glamour of the helmet and the shininess and all that. They'll probably come up with some way to camouflage them, make them look better. But yeah, looks like big marshmallows on top of these big guys' heads. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, they'll figure something out, everybody. It's unfortunate in some degree, football is a game of contact, and that's the way it is, that's what made it so popular. But you keep legislating and legislating and changing things so nobody gets hurt, it's basically going to be touch football. But I don't know. I don't know what their conclusion has been wearing them in practice, if say it's cut down on concussions. But I think what's cut down on concussions is they don't hit like they used to in
Right.
training camp. They kind
Right.
of run around, and nobody, even on pad days where they're hitting, they really don't drill somebody to the ground. You might get an initial pop, but that's about it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's not as nearly as much contact in the preseason or in practices as there used to be. But would not shock me to see the Guardian cap sooner rather than later. And
I thought you were
anything for
talking about
safety.
what the baseball team wears.
Oh, not in this case. Not in this case. That's something else new that I can't get used to. I mean, there's so many changes for this old guy to get used to, you know. But
Yeah, I
at any
call them the
rate,
Indians out of protest.
I still call it Jacobs Field, so that's on me. Candy corn guy, I can't put his comment up on the screen, but he did ask us via Twitter. Since I said you can ask us anything, he asked us what the price of candy corn is in China, which frankly I don't know, but I would consider it to be sort of a Western decadence that they would not sell in China because the regime there would not want to see people as happy as you would if they had candy corn. So there's my answer, candy corn guy. But he also wants us to explain the new kickoff rules, which I think we would happily do if we fully understood them. It is very, very different, but uh, Fred fled the fled the broadcast once the new kickoff rules were asked about. Basically, the ball's kicked off and from a standard position, but people are allowed to line up at the 35. They aren't allowed to get a running start, and it is all very, very confusing. I suggest you go to YouTube, look at the XFL kickoffs, because that's basically what it is. And it is very, very different. Very, very different. So Fred is coming back. Welcome back, Fred. Sorry to see you go there for a minute.
My microphone back. I don't know what happened there, but
All right. Well, as long as we can hear you,
you got
because otherwise you have to listen to me.
explain.
Yeah, I fully explained the kickoff rules. Everybody's up to date now, so we're all good. We're all good. Candy corn guy with another question: shouldn't there be penalties for tackles like Minka Fitzpatrick did to Chubb last season if player safety is so paramount? That's an interesting question. But what Fitzpatrick did is legal by every single NFL rule, right, Fred?
Yeah, I mean, they find guys like crazy. Every Friday, it's become an industry. All the writers write stories pretty much about the fines given out, in the previous game, which I always find kind of ironic. A guy gets fined 25,000. He wasn't even called for a penalty or something. I don't think Fitzpatrick was flagged for doing anything illegal. Plus, I don't remember if he even got, fined for it. So again, Chubb said it was legal. It might have been, when he was down to take a hit like that. I think it's kind of an unwritten rule, but I don't think it's illegal. So yeah, it's you think about some of the Jack Tatum, highlight films, and unfortunate the Daryl Stingley and stuff like that. It it happens in football. And, I don't think necessarily, especially with Fitzpatrick, everything I've heard about him that, that it isn't something he was trying to do. But,
Mm-hmm.
yep, it's unfortunate part of the game. But, yeah, I mean, that's what I said before. Football is a contact sport, and you can legislate a lot, but eventually you got to draw the line somewhere,
Yeah.
Obviously, blatant hits, but I'd have to go back and see. I don't think he was fined even for it, and he
Mm-hmm.
certainly wasn't penalized. So I don't know how you can, when they're looking at all those videos, how you can say, hey, you shouldn't have hurt the guy.
Right.
If it was a legal hit, you can't just make something up.
Exactly. And every time they try to legislate the game a little bit safer, it winds up sort of slowing the game down, creating additional replay situations like with the targeting rule, so on and so forth. Not that I'm against the targeting rule. It's just so, really complicates the job for officials. So I mean, there's positives and negatives with trying to legislate exactly the way that tackling can occur during the course of the game. But obviously, we certainly relate CCG. A lot of people really didn't like the way that transpired. Obviously, we didn't like the end effect of what happened to Nick Chubb, and everybody is, of course, hoping that he comes back strong as early in the season as possible. All right, another question from Fumble13. He says, how many trades will Barry do before the season? I think two. The boys last night talked about cuts, but not too much about trades. Do you think Barry pawns off an extra wide receiver or defensive tackle? I might even add quarterback to that list, Fred.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about it. Talk about quarterback. There's no way they're going to have four quarterbacks come the season. In fact, Barry has not had more than two in the previous three seasons. In fact, even with Baker Mayfield, he just had Case Keenum. He likes to, have two quarterbacks and then have it on the practice squad. Last year, he wrote he went so far as to trade Josh Dobbs and leave him exposed with DTR, and it came back to haunt him. So I think that they would probably keep three this year. But if they get through the preseason training camp, everything is a go with Watson, Winston, and then whoever they decide, Huntley or Thompson Robinson's the third. The other one they will look to trade and look to a team that might have suffered an injury to their quarterback during training camp or the preseason, because I think they look at that as an asset. If you got a 6th round or whatever it was for Dobbs, I think you could get that or better for Huntley or DTR. I don't know if they'd want to cut either of them because they would be snatched up,
Right.
but I do think they would try to trade away and get something for them. Those are always future assets that you see come back in a future draft where you trade a 6th or 7th round, and nowadays you get pretty good players even for them. As far as I've been saying this all along, the Browns have right now, it looks like a lot of depth on the defensive tackle position, and you don't know if they can keep all those guys, but you never have enough of them. And you could have injuries in training camp and preseason. But say
Yep.
everybody that goes to camp, is healthy, rather than cut a Maurice Hurst or Siaki Ika or whoever, I can see them trading them if they could find a backup tight end with a team or something that's in the same position. They have too many tight ends and they don't want to cut a good veteran. So that's where you can maybe find some matches, teams that are going to cut a guy, and the GMs call and say, look, I know you got a problem. I got a problem. Instead of exposing them to waivers, why don't we just swap players? Or, trade a guy off for a 6th, 7th round pick or something like that. Same thing coming the other way. So I can see him being active at tight end. I can see him being active with maybe a strength at defensive tackle. I could see him at linebacker. I always use the example Malcolm Smith. He was a linebacker they picked up in the middle of training camp in his 30s, came in and was a second leading tackler. Last year, Shelby Harris did not sign with the Browns, a 31-year-old, played probably one of the best defensive tackles for the Browns last year. He wasn't even in Greenbrier. When they got home, they made the call and brought him in. So there's a lot on their list, the 30-something type guys that I see them looking that over. But I think you're going to see them go to training camp, look at the young guys at wide receiver and some of these other positions and make a decision and say, okay, we're good enough, or no, we really don't like the way our young receivers have responded in camp, and we really need to get a veteran at the 4 spot. And you look around, who's out there? Again, there might be a free agent. Michael Thomas, I think, is still out there.
Right.
Or you might go with a trade route again, trading off, some of your strength for a backup or a guy that's down the depth chart or something. But you don't have a lot of needs, but a lot's going to be predicated by injuries and how training camp goes. I'm pretty sure last year they went through training camp and Jim Schwartz looked at all the young guys and said, look, this guy is not ready to play right now. Go get me Shelby Harris or a guy like that. And that's right. What they did. That's exactly what they would do, I think, this year. Is look and see what they have. They have 90 guys in camp. They'll make decisions. Nope, this guy's not ready to go. Let's go find a veteran that can stick right in here now.
Right. Hey, we've got a couple of questions from the chat, a couple of things I want to talk about here, but continue to hit us up with your questions, your comments. We'd like to focus on those throughout the course of the show. I've got some stuff here, sort of as backup, but we much prefer to talk about what you guys want to talk about. And one of those things, obviously, from Zeke Dog on YouTube is Bernie Kosar. The big story this week, was that Cleveland Magazine's story about Bernie Kosar having early stage Parkinson's and needing a liver transplant. Not a lot to talk about here, but, Bernie obviously has a special place for us here at the OBR. We were once called Bernie's Insiders. We worked closely with Bernie and his brother, Brian Kosar, during that point in time. I had a chance to talk with Bernie a couple of weeks ago and learned about his situation. And I just want to say on behalf of everyone at the OBR that our thoughts are with Bernie right now. And whatever he needs, we've got his back here. The NFL's support for the health of veteran players is not maybe what you might think it is. And that's a subject we'd like to highlight on the OBR in the months and the years ahead. And there's a lot of subjects about this which are a concern, not particularly in Bernie's case, but in general. For example, the use of opioids among veteran players because of all the injuries that they've suffered, so on and so forth. There's a lot of issues with veteran players suffering from health effects from their playing days that come to mind when I think of Bernie's particular issues. But more to the point, our thoughts are with Bernie right now, and whatever he needs, if he needs anything from us, like I said, we got his back. Fred, I'm sure you have a lot of good memories of Bernie from his days here, and I'm sure your thoughts are with him as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I was able to work with him. In fact, it's how I got hooked up with the OBR. Mutual acquaintance of mine knew him, and I was with clevelandbrowns.com and was looking maybe to move off. And and he talked, with me a little bit and I think he passed my name on to you, and then you called
Mhm.
me, and that was 20 some years ago. But I'd worked with him. I did a show with WTAM on the radio every week out at MGM Northfield, out at Kozar had a restaurant out there. Did that every week, got to know him real well, and just a real good guy all the way around. And you feel bad what's happened to him physically, and you feel it's bad, even with the Brown situation, as much bigger that was with him, and to kind of lose out on his position, doing, because of whatever happened, there a couple years ago, especially now. So yeah, hearts prayers are out with Bernie for sure.
Absolutely, and best of luck to him in his new endeavors. He's trying to start up a health consultancy. He's really into supplements and healthy eating and all that stuff that I should certainly be doing. That we talked about a couple of weeks ago, and just a humble, still very humble, great guy. People coming up to him asking for photographs. He's always very willing to do that sort of stuff, and always very humble, and just a great dude, and deserves the best. But at any rate, appreciate the thoughts, Zeke Dog, and we will keep Bernie in mind as we move forward here. Another question from Candy Corn Guy. He asked, will we see Watson finally come out with a clear mind and start actually playing like he did in 2020? And Fred, your prediction for Deshaun Watson this year may not be at 2020 levels, but you're expecting a bounce back year for Deshaun Watson, at least in your quarterback preview article a couple of weeks ago.
Well, yeah, I mean, you had to bring that up, hold me to it. That's the $1 million question, Candy Corn. If Watson were to play like that, there would just be no question the Browns chant. They're definitely a Super Bowl contender. He would be in the talk for, MVP, as far as he played with Houston. They were 4-12. So he went to the Pro Bowl 3 out of 4 years there. The year he didn't was his rookie year when he tore his ACL. And so, it's just, that's why the Browns gave up and went through everything they've gone through, is to get a franchise type quarterback. We talked about Bernie Kosar. I've covered this team since Brian Sipe, and Kosar is probably the closest thing the Browns have had to a real franchise quarterback,
Right.
elite quarterback. And that's, in the mid to late 80s. So you're talking 30, 35 years. They just don't grow on trees. And everybody's like, well, let's just move on from Watson and get a new one. Well, it's taken this long to even get to the point that you felt that you have a chance. So, he has shown to me, being around him, that he really isn't just, a lot of the national narrative is, oh, he got the 230 million guaranteed, overpay. Now he's just checked out and doesn't care. This guy, I really think that's why he got hurt, or not got hurt, but why he had such a strange season, because I think he didn't let on that he was hurt, and it just kept building. I think there's a good chance that some of the damage in that shoulder was done in that third game, and he didn't tell the team really until just prior to the Ravens game. I mean, he kind of poo-pooed it. I'm okay. I'll be ready to go. And then whether it was that or a completely different thing, just nagged him all year. But he could have sat down when he was hurt then. He could have sat down in that Ravens game, when he sprained the ankle and he broke the bone. We find out after the game in the shoulder. But he kept playing. And so I really think he's going to have the money regardless. I think it comes a point there's a pride issue, and he really wants to show people that he's a legitimate elite quarterback. I've said it along, this team is good. And if he can just play average to above average, this team can make the playoffs. But when you got the defense and everything, that you have, they showed that last year when you played 5 different quarterbacks. But to go deep or to win the Super Bowl or get to the Super Bowl, he's going to have to play nearly elite, maybe not top 5, but certainly top 12, top 10. And I think it's in there. He didn't just lose everything. He's still 28 years old.
Right.
And the reason I projected that, because they got a better team here. They're going to go to a passing offense, play back to his skill sets that he went with in Houston, where he's successful. But his statistics in Houston would have broken the Browns franchise records. He threw for over 4,000 yards in 2020 and led the NFL in passing. As I pointed out on here several times and in that story, the last Browns quarterback to throw for 30 touchdowns was Brian Sipe in 1980. They now play 17 games. If he just averages not even 2 a game, you're talking about 1.7 touchdowns a game, that's over 30. And I think that's very doable in this offense. He's just got to stay on the field. If the guy stays on the field and stays upright, I think there's no reason that he cannot have a good season. It might not be as good as it was in Houston, but it doesn't have to be.
Right.
That's where it comes in with me. I like what Joe Flacco did last year. I'm not taking anything away from him. But what a lot of people overlook is he just kind of, a veteran guy, just fell into the cockpit of a very strong offense that had good pass protection. They had a good system, and Kevin Stefanski put him in position, and he had like some of the best, probably the best 5-game stretch of his career. It was one of the best stretches of Browns quarterback. I don't think anybody would say that Watson doesn't have, assuming his arm's healthy, doesn't have a better arm than Joe Flacco, or at least as good,
Right.
has more mobility, is 11, 12 years younger, can run. I mean, he's got everything there other than a little bit, I think, lacking of confidence because of what's transpired the last 3 or 4 years. So he's just got to get on the field, and I think he'll play his way. You talk about any major league player that goes through a slump. They just keep swinging the bat. Jose Ramirez has went through slumps, but eventually he ends up being an all-star and one of the best players in the league. They figure it out, and I don't think there's any difference with Deshaun Watson. If he stays on the field for 17 games, I think he'll be pushing 30 touchdowns or more, which would be a franchise record.
That would be incredible. This team would obviously make a run, if that turns out to be the case. So much hinges on Watson this year. Again, keep hitting us up with your comments and questions. We will get to them. First of all, I want to talk about our friends at Core Home Fitness. They are the sponsors of this program. They are also sponsors of the OBR Newswire. You can find them at corehomefitness.com and check out their assortment of lifting equipment. Especially check out their top-rated adjustable dumbbells. They are the best ones you're going to be able to find anywhere on the market. As I always say, don't take it from me. Take it from the New York Times and Men's Health and Consumers Reports, all of whom put them right at the top. They are the Myles Garrett of adjustable dumbbells. They are without peer in their niche. You can also check out their other products like the Glute Drive Plus and the Fight Master. Put them all together, crush your goals in 2024, and do it without having to schlep down to the gym all the time. Bring the gym home. They've got a US-based support team, fast shipping, hassle-free returns, you name it. They know what they're doing, so check out corehomefitness.com for the ultimate in in-home fitness equipment. They've stepped up to sponsor the OBR. They rock. Thank you, Core Home Fitness. All right, let's move on with Browns talk. We've got a couple questions here that we can go through. And let's hit up next a question from Sancho Bermuda, who wants to know who will wear the green dot on defense. Asking if Schwartz is calling plays on defense, and just noting that Schwartz is a fantastic defensive coordinator. Any thoughts on this? Is it going to be Jordan Hicks, Fred?
Yeah, Jordan Hicks. Schwartz has not said that per se, but he said that, the veteran leadership comes in, kind of takes over the Anthony Walker role. He's had more production. He stayed on the field than Walker did. He's had over 100 tackles the last 5 years. Anybody that's talked with him, or talked to players that have played with him, rave about his leadership. And so I fully expect him, to be that guy. I think JOK, can do it. I still think that he's, that's not his role. I think you want that veteran linebacker leadership, Jordan Hicks. That's what he's brought here. And he played, I believe, with or under Schwartz before. So he's very familiar with him. And this defense, I expect him to move into that role.
Right. I want to talk a little bit about Schwartz and his defense, because obviously that game against the Houston Texans left us all with a pretty bad taste in our mouth. And it sort of ties into a story that Pete wrote today. Pete wrote about what he called the Myles Garrett effect, right? Why is it that no one else on the Cleveland Browns gets double-digit sacks, right? It's Myles Garrett. Jadeveon Clowney never did it. Zadarius Smith wasn't able to do it. No one can get double-digit sacks. And Pete's theory is that, number one, you don't get double-digit sacks because by the time you get to the quarterback, Myles Garrett has probably already been there. But secondly, defenses adjust to Garrett and they get rid of the ball much quicker, right? And that's what Houston did. Houston was getting rid of the ball very, very quickly. And the question I have for you is, since we know offenses are going to do this because of Myles Garrett and Michael Hall and Zadarius Smith and the rest of those guys are just going to accelerate that tendency with the fearsomeness of that pass rush, how does the defense adapt to that? Do you have corners start playing a little bit tighter? What do you do? Can Schwartz adapt to offenses that are just going to try to get that ball out as quickly as possible because of the fearsomeness of the Browns pass rush?
Well, that's the age-old question. There's been, back to the fearsome foursome, the purple people eaters, it's dealing with a pass rush. That's a good problem to have. I think that being exposed the way that playoff, I think they said it was a bad day to have a bad day. I think there's a lot more to it than that. And I think that it really drove them all off season, and it will motivate them. And when we talked to Jim Schwartz in the off season, first time, he brought it up several times, and that stuck in his craw. He's embarrassed for it. And he also is going to use that to motivate this group. He's got most of the same guys back that were in that game. And I think he's not going to let them forget it. Now, with that said, if you got a group of pass rushers that can get to the quarterback quickly, that's on the secondary. If, the Greg Newsoms and Denzel Wards and Martin Emersons and whoever's in coverage, they got to get on their man and cover him quickly. Stroud in that game, in that playoff game, not just picking on him, but it sure looked like Newsom was getting beat badly that day. He was running down the field behind, receivers by 10 yards. He's got to play better, or they got to find some scheme, to handle that. Same way I remember Sian Taki's not here anymore. He was getting burned by tight ends in that game. He was, getting beat by 10, 15 yards, and guys were running open, and I think part of that wasn't so much, it was they were rolling the quarterback out away, from Garrett or the pass rush. And so, yeah, your question, they're going to do that and see that on film until the Browns stop it. So I just think that's a work in progress they're going to do. They got good players, just got to put them in positions. I think one of the equalizers, too, is a guy like JOK. If you remember in that game, he was like a missile. He went shooting in there a couple times and sacked the quarterback or tackled the receiver they dumped the ball to. So yeah, I think there's work to be done. That I don't think they can rest on their laurels. I thought they were a good defense, but everybody kept, they're number one ranked. I'm more interested in the amount of points you give up, because that's how you win games. It isn't limiting the number of yards that can help, but you want to be number one in fewest points allowed, takeaways, things like that. So I think there's room to grow, and that's a good thing. Going into the second year, you have almost the whole group returning, and so Schwartz talked about that. Like in a baseball pitcher just throws fastballs. That's what he said they did mostly last year. This year, they're going to be able to throw the changeup and curveballs and mix things up and do things a little more aggressive, because the guys know the scheme well enough. And so I think they'll be fine. They're going to play a lot of good quarterbacks this year. And that's the one thing that you think of last year. It seemed like whenever they had a team, for the most part, that they were playing against the top quarterback, he was injured or dinged up a little. I mean, they didn't really see Joe Burrow. They didn't really, get Brock Purdy was kind of something. He was dinged up a little when they beat him. You go down the list, some of the different ones they played. So they're gonna, at least on paper, Aaron Rodgers didn't play. So they're gonna have a good test this year when you look at the schedule.
Right. Let's go to another question from Candy Corn Guy. He talks about the confidence level of Winston if he plays. This is a question I've had too. I mean, Winston has sort of regressed a little bit. He only started 10 games in 4 years with the Saints, if I'm not mistaken. His quarterback rating hasn't been all that great. Do we think he can take a step up with the Browns and, play maybe a little bit better than he showed when he was with the Saints because he has a better surrounding cast?
I think so. And I think after seeing him in the offseason, I can see why they decided on Winston over bringing Flacco back. I mean, first of all, he's mobile. He's got more skill set, similar to Deshaun Watson, as well as Tyler Huntley and even DTR. I think he's 30 years old, so he's like 9 years younger. And there's a reason the guy was the number one pick in the draft. I mean, the same thing you could say about Baker Mayfield. He might not be, a top 5 quarterback, but he's got skills too. And there's a reason he's a starting quarterback in the NFL. I think Winston, looked pretty good to me. He was taking a lot of the reps because Watson, they were limiting his throwing when we were out there. And he's very exuberant, very excited. And he talks up Watson a lot. And so I think he knows his role, and he's kind of the perfect guy to push up Watson and really encourage him and really, come alongside him and learn from some of his mistakes that he's had, early in his career. So I think he could do an adequate job. I don't know if he's going to light the world on fire, but he's had times where he stepped in. I don't know if it was Drew Brees had some problem and he stepped in and played well, but you hope your backup never plays. I mean, to be honest, that's why they traded Dobbs last year and went with DTR, because they expected to never even put him in the game except when it was a mop-up role. And we know what happened. So they wanted to make sure that didn't happen again. they kind of went the other way and overloaded. They got 4 veteran quarterbacks right now on the roster, and I think Winston can be fine. I think he's what you want. You hope if you lose your starter, it's a game or two, not the season.
All right. Well, to answer another candy corn guy question, chat username says they do sell candy corn in China. It's not outlawed as a Western decadence, but it's mostly shaped as mini yellow corn, about 50 cents to 150 in China. But I don't know if you can call mini yellow corn candy corn. Candy corn is multicolored by definition. That's just wrong. That's communist corn. It's just, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure I accept that. But thank you for looking it up, chat username. It's most appreciated. Search MDC writes in. He says, any updates about the feeling on Amari Cooper getting the contract settled? Are we still confident? And we have, Fred, you and I expressed confidence that this is going to get settled. Are we still confident?
Yeah, I am. I mean, it's still a couple weeks away. Both sides are sitting on a beach or doing something, and when they pick up the phone and decide one of them makes a call, who's the first to blink and get the thing going. As I've said before, under the NFLPA, the contracts for a veteran under contract, he's not unsigned. He's under contract for one more year. I don't know if it's 20 million or 23 million, but it's a lot of money. But the mandatory fine for missing practice is 50,000 a day. I mean, I don't care how much you have. I don't want to fork over 50,000 or 100,000 or whatever it is by just missing practice. Last year, it's not that he needs to be at practice, but last year he had something, they never said what it was. I think it was something with his core, but he didn't practice really much at all at Greenbrier. So, I would think that he'd want to get something done. So even if he is down there and just standing around and not practicing much, that he's not getting fined for it. But I'd be very surprised if he digs his heels in and makes a big deal out of it. The Browns know how important he is and how big this season is and their wide receiver core. You cannot go into the season with Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore as your top two, and that's it. They're both somewhat unproven. Have potential, but somewhat unproven. Andrew Berry knows that. I think you got the same thing going on, maybe even a little worse with Brandon Ayuk and the 49ers, but I'm pretty sure they'll get something figured out. The bottom line is, they both want, kind of the same thing. They want to be successful. He's in a position, this is his last probably big chance to get, more than 1 year contract. I don't know what he's quibbling about. If it's he's got 1 more year. If he wants 2 years added on, or one added on, or what. But I'm pretty sure they'll come to some agreement. I think they just really need to sit down and talk and come to some. Andrew Berry seems to be somebody that is able to get things done when he gets. I think this is his 5th year. I can't think of any real contract negotiations, at this point that have been a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to share your confidence here. And I do share it to a degree. I mean, this is not a Jerry Jones type of organization that's going to draw red lines in the sand, with Amari Cooper when they need him to get to the playoffs this year. I think it's going to get done. I think he's going to get another year. I think it will be structured in a way to minimize the damage to the salary cap if Cooper, falls off a cliff this year, which I don't expect is going to happen. But I think he gets done. But we'll see. He doesn't need every minute at Greenbrier like some of the other guys will. And one little advantage of this might be that it gets Ced Tillman and some of those other guys some more reps while he's out. Sancho Bermuda, detecting that we're big video game guys, asked if there's any excitement for the NCAA football video game. It's kind of a big deal. I my video gaming mostly is Halo and Plants vs Zombies, showing how dated my video gaming habits are. I am not psyched up for the NCAA football video game simply because I know I'm going to be too busy to get good at it. Uh, Producer Ian may have a different perspective on this. I'll have to ask him about it, but I know a lot of people are really excited about this video game. And I just see the chatter on social media about it. I know a lot of people are really fired up about it. Um, and there you go. There's a word from Ian, the producer, about that game, and hopefully he doesn't get screwed up, and it's as good as everybody's anticipating that it will be. Fred, I want to talk a little bit about a guy that we were discussing earlier with relation to the Houston game, and that is JOK. Um, there was an article on another website this morning talking about JOK taking another leap in order for the Browns to progress defensively. Um, I guess I have two questions. One question is whether you think JOK can make additional progress, or just with the additional year of experience, whether we can expect him to make a leap. And then the second question I have is, he was playing a heck of a lot of snaps last year. He was playing in 85% or more of the snaps, I think, for like the last half of the season last year. And so my second question is just whether you have any concern about his utilization being so high, and them keeping him on the field so much.
Well, I think he took a big leap last year anyway. If he
Mm-hmm.
just plays that well, he had 20 tackles for loss. Think about that. Some of the guys on defense didn't even have 20 tackles, and he had 20 tackles for loss. And I mean, you think later in the season, it was just like he really figured it out. And I mean, he was shooting from his linebacker position, and quarterback would throw it out, swing out in the flat, and he'd tackle him for a loss back there, or he'd shoot in and blitz the quarterback. Um, I remember in a press conference, we talked to Jim Schwartz every Thursday, and somebody asked him a question about JOK, and he said, you know what? He's really got to the point where he deserves to be on the field for all three downs. So we're going to start having him out there on all three downs. And that's kind of correlated in the second half of the season when you said his playing time was up. I think they took the guardrails off and said, hey, you're one of the best players we have on defense. You have to be out in the field. And I do think that, early in his career, he was banged up. He didn't make it through, I don't think, either of his first couple seasons without some type of injury. He's undersized. He's 220 pounds. He's like a big safety. But I think Jim Schwartz knows how to play him in that system perfectly. Don't make him be a thumper, filling the gap and taking on Derrick Henry, coming up the
Right.
middle. That's what Jordan Hicks and some of the defensive tackles are for. You get him out in coverage or chasing the quarterback or shadowing Lamar Jackson or whatever. There's so many things he can do. I just think that you use him properly. I think that that there is another gear that he can get to, and I think that he made the Pro Bowl, I think, as an alternate, but I think he's destined on the trajectory to be, a perennial Pro Bowl player. And so I think that really is a bright sign. You put him behind this defensive line, I think it makes him look good and it lets him shine and do what he does best. And that's using his speed. And I think also he's not thinking about it as much as he did early in his career. He's just reading and reacting, and I think that's what Schwartz really has unlocked in him. So I'm excited
Yeah.
to see him this year for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of excitement in the chat room as well. For JOK this year, folks saying that they think he's going to be nuts this year, especially with that defensive line, and the aggressiveness during the offseason, bolstering the defensive tackle position. Be fun to see what JOK can do this year. All right, question from Fumble 13. PFW predicted we would finish last in the division this year. Please tell me they are completely crazy. Wish granted, they're completely nuts, Fumble. They're nuts for putting a prediction out there in the first place for the AFC North and expressing any confidence in it, because so much, this division is so tight, so good that injuries are going to play a huge factor this year. Any quarterback having an off year, Lamar Jackson gets hurt, it's going to rewrite the division. I don't think the Browns. I mean, you have to be very negative about Deshaun Watson to put the Browns in last place. Fred, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it is. I've said this. You have a case. You could in the AFC North. I think it's the best division in the NFL. You could make a case for all four teams getting first place or all four teams getting last place. I didn't think you could do that last year with the Steelers, but their defense got them to the playoffs. I don't know how good Russell Wilson or Justin Fields will be, but if they get competent quarterback play, they could make a run, for first place. They could also be in last place. I think any team in this division could win the division. I think any team could get last place. Just what you said. It is so tight. It's going to be those 6 games. They're beating each other up. Who suffers the biggest injuries? I mean, I don't think anybody at this time last year would have said the Bengals are going to get last place. They got last place. Why'd they get last place? Basically because they lost their quarterback.
Right.
And the Browns got second and they lost their quarterback. They lost 3 or 4 quarterbacks. So yeah, I'm not putting too much stock in that. Again, you tell me, who's the healthiest team. I'll just have to look at history. Last year, the final 4 teams in the NFL playoffs all had their franchise quarterback still going. In the AFC, it was Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes. In the NFC, what was it? Brock Purdy, and I don't even know who they played. Jalen Hurts, but that's what it comes down to. You got to have your best players playing when it counts.
Right.
And so that will go a long way. I'm not saying the team's out if they have an injury, but that goes a long way in determining things, especially when teams are very close, in talent and play level.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be a fascinating year. It's going to be a fascinating season. AFC North is just second half of this season is just going to be brutal. The Browns have to come out of the first half of the schedule with a winning record and as healthy as possible, because the last half of the season, when they're playing the AFC North, it is going to be rough and it's going to be intense. And I hope you're all hanging out with us on the OBR, on the forums, and on these video streams and in the chat rooms. And we're all talking about it and having a good time. And I want to thank you for hanging out with us tonight. According to the stats we've been watching during the course of this broadcast, hundreds and hundreds of Browns fans have wandered across this stream during the course of the broadcast, which is amazing given that there's very little Browns news right now. Nothing really going on. Everybody's on vacation, but still hundreds and hundreds of Browns fans tuning in to this broadcast. And we love you, man. Really appreciate it. Appreciate all the great questions. And as always, the legend, Mr. Freddie Greetham. Appreciate you, sir. Thank you very much for hanging out with me for the last hour. And
it's always fun, and just getting ramped up. 2 weeks from now, it'll be for real. and join us right here. I'll be in Greenbrier. We'll update you right from the field, what's going on. So thanks for checking us out.
All right. Good night, folks. We'll see you next Wednesday.
See you. Thank you.